Is it too early to put Rhea Ripley in the top 3 women of all time?
Yes.
Okay. I said the same thing. Do you think it will be an easy conversation for her to be in the top 3 when it's all said and done? She is 28. I want to remind you.
Yes, it'll be a very easy conversation.
Okay.
If Rhea Ripley maintains the current pace she's on, that'll be a conversation I will look at somebody and say, unless Bianca has a great next 10 years, or see, are we talking WWE or women all?
Let's hold the WWE because they were talking WWE.
Okay, because then you're looking at Becky, you're looking at Asuka.
Asuka's towards the end of her time, but yeah.
But I'm just what the top 3 is looking like right now.
I'm just saying when she's had injuries and then
but she's nearing that point, so we have and then Dealer's choice of Lita, Trish, Bayley, Chyna, just whoever your personal opinion will go behind. I'll fall behind Bayley because I think Bayley is the most underrated WWE superstar of all time.
I would say she's most underrated. I put her probably more around 5 right now. I think Rhea definitely is easily in the conversation for top 10.
I think I can happily make that debate of top 10. I will happily fight on the side of Rhea for the debate in top 10.
I was going to say, the conversation's easier for top 10 right now. Top 3, I think it's insane.
Couldn't even make a conversation for top 5 yet.
I think 2027, I think we'll start having that
conversation. I agree.
For top 5.
I couldn't make that conversation for top 5. I would very happily argue against it. Because for everything, I would look at you right now and say, okay, Bayley or Rhea all time.
Mm-hmm.
You can't argue Becky. And if you try to argue Becky, get the fuck out the door. If you try to argue Becky over Rhea, if you try to say Rhea over Becky, get the fuck out the door.
I'm like, you said Becky. No. I'm like, buddy, you've been the number 1. Becky's the greatest women's wrestler of all time. I'm like, what?
If you try to say, Rhea over Becky or Rhea over Bayley right now, Rhea over Asuka, you can't give her Trish or Lita yet because at the end of the day, those two completely changed the generation of wrestling. Mm-hmm. It's not just what did you accomplish, which is what people look at and why some people say Charlotte's the greatest women's wrestler of all time because no one's had as many belts as her.
Yeah.
Becky and Bayley, we've defined a generation. Asuka came in and redefined what women's wrestling should look like.
Mm-hmm.
Trish and Lita started that path that everyone else pushed. Rhea is yet to have her completely redefine the generation of wrestling moment. She's built upon what the 4 horsewomen have done.
You're right.
I don't think she is fully pushed through an entire thing yet.
So, here's my question. On top of this whole possible debate that we're not going to have because it'll take us a whole episode. Who's more popular all the time? Yeah, the man 2019 Becky Lynch, broken nose, WrestleMania main event, or current Rhea Ripley. I want to remind you, there are people who do not talk about wrestling who know who Rhea Ripley is.
So I'm going to say this because I also know what the current state of IWC Twitter is and just Twitter in general. It's Rhea Ripley because she's a big buff goth woman who people want to be stepped on. And as Elena Black said, my OnlyFans isn't just for me to do OnlyFans. It's to capitalize all wrestler fans who will pay for that shit.
She's right. She's right.
Because there will be wrestling fans who pay for that shit.
Game is game. Recognize. I got to recognize game. But I mean, she's already stated that it's not going to be OnlyFans. It's going to be like Playboy, not Playboy. Playboy is way too. Oh my god, that's way too. That's going to be like Victoria's Secret.
But I feel like we are very much looking at Rhea Ripley. And if you want to have that debate of who's more popular among wrestling fans, between genuine wrestling fans, because if we include just general public and people who say they're wrestling fans, but then only look at certain pictures of women's wrestlers, because that is a very much a wrestling cult of itself. Dude, you've seen the Twitter accounts dedicated to all that.
I know.
But I am the authentic wrestling fans. People would, I think, take 2019 the man Becky Lynch 9 times out of 10.
Yeah.
9 in that one time is you're willing to sacrifice some of that out of character work for that slightly better in ring work.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Becky just kills Rhea character work wise.
That's
I don't think there's been a better character working wise, women wise, than 2019 Becky. Because the moment she stood up there with the bloody ass, broken nose, shit shifted for her.
Yeah, I mean, it should have for all women's wrestling.
Yes.
Because like she was super popular back then, but like that was right before her Survivor Series match with Ronda Rousey, which would have been probably the biggest women's wrestling match of all time. I know people will say that Ronda wasn't that popular back then. She was, but that moment, even though she was out, like shot up the fucking charts.
She literally redefined what women's wrestling was.
Mm-hmm.
Some people say, well, this wrestler redefined what men's wrestling is, or this guy or this girl. Becky Lynch literally did it. You can argue it. You can't argue the Becky Lynch thing.
It got people to take women's wrestling more serious.
People were not fully behind the women's wrestling movement of taking them away from divas.
Evolution
Becky
happened in 2018.
Lynch
right?
sold the idea of it being women's wrestling, not divas wrestling.
It's Evos. I don't care about Evos. WWE. Okay, happened 2018. Okay.
But I'll say this. I always say, and that's my Hall of Fame WWE thing, not my NFL Hall of Fame thing, is if you can tell the story of the game without mentioning them, if you can tell an authentic story of the NFL without saying their name and not hurt the story of football,
mm-hmm.
if you can say without mentioning the name and it's not even close, they do not deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. If you cannot mention the name, if you have to mention the name, they are Hall of Famers. Who are you thinking of?
You're thinking about putting Eli Manning in the Hall of Fame.
I think eventually, yes. He's not a first ballot Hall of Fame.
Okay, I'm like, what the? I'm like, brother. I'm like,
no. He is one of those guys who, in 4 to 5 years, I'm not against him being in.
Okay.
He should never headline his class.
That's fair.
Should be like Shannon Sharp with the NFL Hall of Fame. He'll get in. He won't headline his class. He'll say his brother was the better football player.
True.
But he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. I'm not going to look at you and say he deserves to be a first ballot guy. But it's the same thing it's like my argument with Antonio Brown not being a Hall of Famer. You can tell the story of the NFL and not mention his name once. Easily.
He'll also have the Terrell Owens effect where you cause issues off field and not. It's going to take
but I think
at least a little bit longer.
Or like when it's all said and done, you can't tell the story of the NFL without Lamar Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
But you can
Lamar
tell the
can
story.
retire tomorrow, and he'll be.
But you can tell the story of the NFL without mentioning right now Joe Burrow.
Ooh, no, you can't.
At the very moment, you can. I think at the very moment you can.
Man. If you're going year by year telling the story, no.
Well, if you go year by year, there's about 100,000 Hall of Famers.
But there's people you can be like, no.
Antonio Brown, if you go year by year, you cannot go without mentioning Antonio Brown's name.
Yeah, and I think you can go without saying that same about Michael Thomas. Yes, they had great years, fantastic years, record-setting years, but you do not need to mention them to tell the story.
I'm going back to wrestling with this now before we talk about this for 30 minutes. It would be hard to tell a story of women's wrestling without Rhea Ripley. It would be very hard, and you'd hurt the story. You literally cannot tell the story of women's wrestling without the name Becky Lynch coming up. Mm-hmm. You absolutely, I don't care what kind of story you try to tell, that story is just wrong if Becky Lynch's name isn't involved. Rhea Ripley deserves to have a name in that story. But could you do it?
So what you're hearing right now is you're on a kind of if in your mind that Rhea Ripley is a Hall of Famer.
Oh, no. If I was to authentically try to tell you the story of women's wrestling, Rhea Ripley's name would be brought up.
No, but I'm telling you, she retires tomorrow. Is she in the Hall of Fame?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. But I'm saying it's a lot easier to not tell the story of Rhea Ripley in women's wrestling.
Yeah.
But you literally, even if you try to avoid Becky Lynch's name, you can't avoid Becky Lynch's name without telling the wrong story.
That's completely fair.
Granted, in 10 years, if Rhea stays at Rhea Ripley it'll be impossible to tell a story of women's wrestling without Rhea Ripley.
There's a
Like
real
how
case.
Bianca's getting in that case of it's getting really hard to not mentioning her in the story of women's wrestling.
I know. I think Bianca Belair's top 5. Easily.
She's another one I struggle with top 5.
I know there's a lot of people who be like, well, what about AJ Lee? And I love AJ Lee. You know this. I love AJ Lee. What about the Bellas? What about blah, blah, blah? The thing about them is they were such a baby phase of the women's wrestling movement is that they weren't allowed to be what these women are now.
My 3 to 8 is very sloppy. I've never sat down and like, here's my 3 to 8. I know who my 1 and 2 are. It's Becky, Asuka.
Next week we are
If you were to sit down and make me say, who's your 3rd greatest woman of wrestling of all time? The answer today could be different tomorrow. Because I haven't sat down with the entire incentive of who are my top 10 greatest women's wrestlers of all time. WWS. If you want me to, I will happily make that list.
You know what? If we have nothing to do next week, which we might, I don't know.
Well, we have Saturday Night Main Event to talk
cover.
about.
Yeah, but
I'll make it to be safe.
Anyways, yeah.
Saturday Main Event.
Well, I guess you know what? We have a curb stomp close for this week.